what's the dream vacation you would want to take? Plus it made the business better. Yeah, 20 months out of a 12-month part. I've learned how to warp time. It also gave them the ability as a leader to grow their roles, to have more impact, to make a greater contribution. How costly would each of these items be if they went wrong?
Maui Mastermind presents the Business Coach Podcast, answering your questions and providing real actionable insights for building a better, stronger, more profitable business without sacrificing your time, life, or freedom anymore.
Well, welcome to another episode of The Business Coach. This week I have something special in store for you. I want to talk about how can you take a 3-month sabbatical from your business and come back to your business that not only did well, but is actually grown and is better, more profitable, larger, and has continued on that trend of upward growth. I'm going to do this through sharing a personal experience, but I want to start with where it started. Several years ago, one of our business coaching clients, his name is RC. He and his wife Dahlia ran a business that was a rehab business. They would buy and rehab and resell somewhere between 90 and 110 houses every year. So at this point, they've done thousands of homes where they've done that for. He's probably the largest rehabber in his area who does this. They have a very profitable, successful business. Well, I remember years ago talking with him, and he was a coaching client, he wanted to go away for all summer to spend the summer with his family. And as he went through it, he planned about how can he take a 7-week trip where his family would go down to Mexico and spend that time together visiting family that was in Mexico, doing a little bit of touring. They had, at that point, 2 young children that they wanted to do. So he carved out a way to do that. He did it. It worked reasonably well that first year. He had so much fun. They said, David, I want to do the same thing the next year. And we tightened in about how he went about doing that. The next year, it worked even better. A year and a half after that, I thought, you know what? At that point, I was taking 12, 13 weeks a year of vacation, roughly 1/4 out of the year gone. But I said, my kids are fairly young. At that point, they were in elementary and middle school. I'm like, I want to take summers off. What would I need to do? So I developed a tool. We called it the Vacation Catalyst. The idea behind it is this. I want you to imagine you're going to say, what's the dream vacation you would want to take? And I want you to do it over an extended period of time. So if you currently take 1 or 2 weeks at a time off from your business, I want you to push yourself to make it at least 4 weeks or 6 weeks. At that time, I was regularly taking 2, 3, 4-week trips. So I said, how would I do the entire summer off? And I planned out a 7, 8-week trip through Italy and Ireland and other parts of the UK, and I thought, this is going to be great. And I said, okay, so I'm going to take this summer off, and I'm going to do that. The time I did it was roughly 20 months later. Roughly, based on that, it was not the next summer, but the summer after that. And so I made that as a plan. I went through and said, well, what are the things that scare me about this? Like, where do I see the places where the business currently doesn't have the team or the internal systems or the knowledge for how to do things? Like, what scares me could go wrong? And I put down things like, well, we could have a key team member quit during that time and my staff might not know how to handle that challenge. At that point, years ago, I was still doing coaching. At that point, I was coaching 20 or 22 of our several hundred clients. Subsequent to that, I don't do that like that same way, but I was at that point. You know, I was the one leading the executive team, and I didn't know, could our business handle somebody else leading the executive team? And I went through and I listed out a list of what they were, and then I put down how costly would each of these items be if they went wrong. You know, for example, if we lost a key team member, how costly? Well, that might be a 4 out of 5. And as I went through, I looked at those that I thought were truly 4s and 5s I needed to deal with. Some of the ones I put down there were probably closer to 2s or 3s as I looked at that. The 2s or 3s, I said, I'm going to prioritize dealing with those later. And then I said, okay, I'm going to tell my team that here we are, we're working to the point where we're going to eat our own cooking, that this summer coming up and this year, a year and a half roughly from now, I will be gone for the summer. So here's the plan to get us to the point where we're ready to do that. And along the way, some things changed with that part as we did. For example, the trip, I realized that I wanted to go away on a trip through Europe, but my family didn't want to be away from home that much. My wife said, sure, let's do it, but our kids, they wanted to be back home enjoying friends. So we ended up doing what was a 3.5-week trip through Italy. This is us with the Colosseum in the background. And it was a great trip, and I learned a lot from that trip. I learned that my kids at that age were more excited about getting to a beautiful hotel that had Netflix than they were about staying in a 2-room suite with 17th century frescoes on the ceiling, right literally next door to the Duomo in Florence, Italy. It was interesting around that part. But it was a really good spark. So how do we go about it? Subsequent to that, I've had many different coaching clients do the same thing. They've planned through what do they want to do. For most of them, it's been this amazing dream vacation as the spark that symbolically gets them away from their business completely. For others, it was just, David, I'm burnt out. I've got another client of ours who ran a construction company. He just said, David, I'm burnt. And 4 months from now, I need to take a 4-month sabbatical. I need to recharge. I've got stuff going on in my personal life. I just need to do that. And he worked with his team to do that part of it. So the key starting point is step number 1, pick your reason for why you're going to be taking that sabbatical. Whether it's the dream vacation that you're going to use as the spark symbolically, it's all it is a symbol, or whether it's I just need to, I'm burning out, I need to do that. Get clear on what you're going to be doing with that time off. Let that pull you into doing the work such that you will be able to do that. Number 2, I want you then to list out what are all the things that scare the crap out of you when you think about taking that time away. All the places you think the business could really struggle with that. And then number 3 is I want you to prioritize each of those things on your list, because you're probably going to have 7, 10, 15 items there. Prioritize on a 1 to 5, 5 being the most expensive if it goes wrong. The things that could hurt your company the most if they go wrong. Which are the ones that matter most? So I'm going to go through each of those items 1 to 5. Each of those items 1 to 5. Each of those items 1 to 5. I'm going to rate it. And then I can put together step number 4 as my game plan to how I'm going to deal with those things that are 5s first, then those things that are 4s, and I'm going to not worry so much about the 3s, 2s, and 1s. Those are more emotional things. Those aren't more practical, pragmatic things in the business. So for example, one of the things that was on there for me is the loss of a key team member. Okay, well, let's take a look at that. Who would I want to be in charge of handling that? How would they go about that? If we lost our leader of marketing, how would we handle that? If we lost our leader of sales, if we lost our leader of operations, if we lost our leader of coaching. And so I worked with my team to say, how do we prepare for that if it were to happen? And we had, in our case, 20 months to deal with that to get it to a better place. And so we did that in a methodical way all the way through that list. Now, step number 6 at this point says, I'm going to set timed formal check-ins about how it's going and progressing. So if I'm planning in a year and a half to do that trip or to take that time away, that summer off, then I'm going to have probably 2 formal check-ins before I get to that date. Maybe it's after 4 to 6 months, and then another 4 to 6 months, and then another 2 months before I leave. Those formal check-ins, I'm going to ask, where do I stand relative to my list of risks or vulnerabilities for being away? What are my priorities over the next period of time before the next formal check-in? How can I bring 1 or 2 of my key leaders or more in on this? In our company, Teresa, who runs our number 2 in the business, she fully supported and bought in with that. The other executive team members for Maui Mastermind, they bought into this. They recognized that this was an example of us eating our own cooking. They loved the idea of that. Plus, it made the business better, and it also gave them the ability as a leader to grow their roles, to have more impact, to make a greater contribution, and to continue to grow in their earnings and rewards because they're contributing more and having more of an impact. It's good for all that. Plus, it gave them more security. Before, if something were to have happened to me, the business would have been fine for a few weeks or even a month or so, but 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, the business would have been hurting. So these are steps that made it where we built more strategic depth, is the term you've heard me use probably before. And then we go do the experience. Now, do we have to be completely away from the business? No, you're probably going to have formal check-ins with your team, but don't make them weekly. You don't want to be checking email. Tell them, saying, look, let's do the following. Let's have 2 check-ins formally, 1 after 30 days, 1 after 60 days, and 90 days later, I'm back in the business. A formal check-in. Save your questions to then. If there is a true emergency, here's how you bring that to my attention. I'm not going to be looking at email, so don't email it to me. if there is a true emergency, and here's what a true emergency would include, things like this, this, and this, I want to do. So go back into my own story. Before we did that trip to Italy, the summer before then was our practice summer. And so during that practice summer, I took 3 weeks off out of every month and worked 5 days in the month. I'd work 2 days this week. 2 weeks later, I would work another 1-2 days. I'd space it out. I'd work 4 or 5 days for each month in the summertime. And that was kind of the training wheels part. The funny thing was, one of our concerns was, what if we lost a key team member? Well, I was going away in June for June, July, and August. And at the end of April, we lost our leader of marketing. And then at the beginning of May, we got notice that our key leader of technology was leaving us. Now, they were great people, and they actually still work with us on a smaller scale way for one of them and in a full way for the other. But one got recruited away for a big opportunity with another company, and he couldn't refuse it, right? It was a great opportunity for him. The other ended up finding another full-time gig and still moonlights with us, and that's fine. They were respectful around that, but it was my worst fear come to pass. And what was funny is all the work we did to prepare for that meant that my team was able to handle that, right? We maintained our certain momentum with marketing while we looked for and searched for a new marketing leader, which we did and were successfully able to do. And the technology part, what we realized was we were able to reshift the role so that our existing technology people just absorbed the role. And they did a great job with that. So don't be so scared to do this, right? Maybe the first time you do that, you go for a shorter period. And maybe for you, the timeline is you want to do this 3 years down the road. But it's doable for just about every business within 3 years for you to take that sabbatical for 3 months. Now, maybe for you, it's not the summer. Now, in our business world, the summer conveniently turns out to be a good time to be away. Why? Because our clientele tend to be business owners, right? We're a business coaching company. So it's a good time to be away. Plus, for me, I've got kids, and so school dictates time away. I mean, I don't want to take time away in January, February, and April, January, February, March, because my kids are in school. It doesn't work that way. Yes, we were able to do some of that when we homeschooled during the heart of COVID, but outside of that, it just wouldn't fit. So for you, you can think about where in your business or your life does it fit for you to take that extended period of time away. I still remember this. I took a river rafting trip. I was probably 10 years into starting my second company, and the business was working pretty well. But I was a workaholic. And my dad invited me and my younger brother Alex on a river raft trip through Canada. I wasn't through Canada. Yeah, we were just driving in a car down the Canadian highway. No, it was a river in Canada. And it was roughly a 10-day river raft trip. It was beautiful. One of the guys on the trip I will always remember, his name is Roy. I can picture Roy in my mind. He's an older guy, somewhere in his late 60s, early 70s, gray hair, thinning at the top, bit bigger in the belly. He and his wife were on this trip, and Roy was a property developer who owned hundreds of millions of dollars of real estate in San Francisco. He was a really successful guy. And so I used the trip as a chance to just talk with him about what he had learned and how he had scaled his real estate investment company and all that. He said something that was maddeningly frustrating to me. He said, "David, this trip is how I did it." And I'm like, "What do you mean by that?" And for 2 or 3 days, he let me stew with it. This idea, "David, this trip is the reason why my company is so successful." And I'm like, "Roy, finally, I've had it. What do you actually mean by that?" And his comment was, "I regularly take time completely away from my business. I force myself to do that. Because when I'm away, 2 things happen. Number 1, the business has to struggle to grow independent of me. My staff struggles with that, and they've developed muscles. Our systems have to improve. And number 2, every time he goes away, that's when he sees where the biggest gaps and owner dependencies are so that he can fix them when he comes back. Those regular times completely away from the business are when the business has its biggest growth, both at that moment and when he comes back to work to improve that." And he said he's been regularly doing that for years. Now that was probably, almost 20 years ago that he shared that with me. And it still stays with me today. So this is why whether you take a full sabbatical for 3 or 6 months, or you're even just going away at first for a complete 1 to 2 week period, it's important for you as a business owner to step away from the business. It's like, growing your children, raising your kids. If you constantly do everything for them, if you're always the one reminding them, waking them up, making their lunch, they're not going to learn any of those things. You've got to give them the space to have certain failures such that they don't die, such that your business doesn't go under. But that's how your people and your company learns where the gaps are, and it sparks the most growth. It's probably the most important vitamin for the growth of an owner-independent business. So I hope this gave you some new thoughts today as you think about that. And by the way, now I liked doing that summer off so much that for years now, this is what I do. Over the course of the year, I'll take off at least 20 months over the course of, not 20 months, excuse me, 20 weeks. Yeah, 20 months out of a 12-month part. I've learned how to warp time. 20 weeks over the year, of which 12 of those weeks will be June, July, August. And it's worked really well. It fits for our family. What do I do when my kids graduate from high school and all of them are out of the house? I don't know. I probably won't take all the time away in the summer that I do. I actually miss working. I probably will take a little bit more extensive time in other pieces of the year. And I'll give an example for it. My friend Stephanie, who I've talked about on this podcast, The Business Coach, many times. She wrote with me the book, Build a Business, Not a Job. And Stephanie's been a great client and a great mentor both. And one of the things she and Jack, her husband, did is, when they were at the final stages in their business, owning it fairly passive, they would go away for a month trip every quarter, sometimes more than one. Some of their trips were to Italy, the Galapagos Islands, through Asia, all these different amazing trips that she put together. And their business was better for it, just like Roy's business was better for it, just like Maui Mastermind is better for it, and just like your business will be better for it. So draw that line in the sand. When are you going to take that sabbatical? What are you going to do in that sabbatical? When's the date you're going to be taking it? Number 2, what are all the things that scare you that you think are risks or vulnerabilities when you do that? 3, put a priority to that by saying, on a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 is the most damaging or expensive, if it goes wrong, which of those things, 1 to 5, grade them all. Number 4, I'm going to put together a plan to handle my most pressing 4s and 5s on that list, doing the 5s first, then the 4s. Step number 5 was to put regular scheduled check-ins, formal check-ins along the way before you get to that point. And then number 6, when you come back from that trip, and you had those time check-ins when you come back from that trip, what did you learn from that? What did your staff learn from that? What did your systems learn from that? What did your business as a whole learn from that? And use that like Roy and Stephanie and other people have to strengthen your business and to truly build an owner-independent company. I wish you the very best. It's going to be so exciting for you. Bye-bye.